Welcome to another Cardano update. Like always, make sure to check out our YouTube memberships and our Patreon if you want access to all of our charts and if you want access to our daily Discord updates. So the market today is going sideways, which is exactly what we need to do. As you can see right here, Bitcoin is still trying to form a low and it's still trying to close the RSI on the weekly at the trend line. I want to show you what could happen after that because I believe that's going to be very good. So first of all, I want to start with what happened in 2023. I believe this move to the downside that we had over here looks very similar to what we had this year, and I believe it looks way more similar to what we had right now than, for example, what we had in this area or in this area. And I want to explain why. So first of all, this move was a 22% move to the downside, unlike, for example, this one, which was 33%, and this one, which was 30%. But not only that, I believe the pattern that we had is also very similar. And here, for example, we had a cross on the bull market support band, but in the short term, we actually formed a new higher high, and only after we broke below the moving average on the weekly RSI again, after getting above it right here, that's when we had a move to the downside. But in the short term, like I said, we had a cross and we actually went a bit higher, and that's exactly what we did this year as well. So here we had a cross on the bull market support band, and then in the short term we formed a new all-time high, but then after we broke below the moving average after getting above it in this area, that's when we had a move to the downside, and that was a 22% move to the downside, which I believe looks very similar to what we had in 2023. So I want to look at what happened exactly after that, and I want to look at what happened after we formed that low. So in the next couple of weeks after that, obviously we got to the bull market support band, which is pretty much exactly what we did in this area as well. When we got to $50,000, when we got to the trend line on the weekly RSI, as you can see, we tested the trend line, and then the next couple of weeks were just green, and after a couple of weeks we actually had a correction. So this, for example, in 2024 in September, this was a, let's say, 15% move to the downside or so, which was not really significant, but it was an important move to happen because during this time we tested the bull market support band and we also tested the moving average on the weekly RSI, and that's exactly what we did back in 2023 as well. So let me quickly go to this year. Here, after we tested the trend line on the weekly RSI, we got above the bull market support band, we tested it, and only after we tested it and only after we tested the moving average on the weekly RSI, that's when the price finally got a move to the upside, and that's when we broke all-time highs. And that's exactly what happened over here as well. After the price dropped to $75,000, we formed a low at the trend line, and then in the next couple of weeks the price got above the bull market support band, but after that it tested the bull market support band, it also tested the moving average on the weekly RSI, and after that we formed all-time highs. So what we need to do right now is pretty simple. We need to close that wick right there at the trend line, and then in the next 2 or 3 weeks Bitcoin could get to the moving average on the weekly RSI, hopefully get above it, and during that time obviously it's also gonna have to get back above the bull market support band. Then maybe a week or two later we should have a correction, which should be some kind of ABC structure, and the exact same thing needs to happen on the RSI as well. So during that time we could test the moving average and then bounce off of it, and that's gonna probably lead to new all-time highs. So this is how I believe this is gonna play out. I don't think it's gonna play out a much different way. It played out the exact same way 3 times in a row, and I believe this time is not gonna be any different. So that's pretty much it about the Bitcoin weekly chart. I also want to look at the Cardano on the 4-hour, because yes, we did form a low over here, but as I mentioned, I think yesterday, Cardano right now kind of needs to get another low or just go sideways, because if you look at the weekly chart real quick over here at the RSI, we are still not at the trend line right there, and I believe we kind of need to get to the trend line. And after we got to the trend line on the weekly RSI, for example right here in 2023, we got a 4x move to the upside, and the exact same thing happened last year as well. We got to the trend line, and after that in the long term we went up quite a lot, and that's exactly what happened back in November of 2020 as well, or I believe actually before that it happened in March. So here during the pandemic drop we had a test of the trend line, and after that we went to all-time highs. But other than that, on the daily chart, on the Cardano chart, we are still at the oversold territory, which is a very good sign because we have only been oversold about 3 times, and each time we got to the oversold territory we had a move to the upside after that. But for the time being, I don't think Cardano is gonna get a huge move to the upside. Even if it gets a short-term bounce, I think it's gonna go back a bit lower, maybe to like 53 cents again. Let's say we get to like 60 cents, it's probably gonna go down after that, because for the time being Bitcoin still needs to close the RSI at the trend line on the weekly, Speaking of Bitcoin, if you look at the daily chart, we are very close to getting to the oversold territory, and this leads me to believe that maybe we're gonna get another low, just because if we actually do end up getting to the oversold territory, that could be extremely bullish. The last time that happened was back in this area when Bitcoin was at $78,000, and before that it was right here at $49,000. So getting oversold could be the best case scenario, but we don't really have to do that, and obviously getting another low right now would pretty much put us below $100,000, and I know many of you are saying that we cannot really afford to close the wick below $100,000 because that's exactly where the 50-week moving average is. So, if we do not want to do that, then we're probably not gonna get another low, but we're also not gonna get to the oversold territory. So yeah, that's it about Bitcoin. I also want to look at Ethereum for a second. Ethereum got another low in the fourth wave move down. It got around $3,000 and then it bounced off the 50% support level. I think the low should be in. I don't really expect the price to go any lower than that, so if the low is in, my target for the much bigger fifth wave of the fifth wave has to be adjusted again. It's at $6,700, and as I mentioned many times in the past, after Ethereum manages to break above the previous 2021 all-time high, which is at about $4,800, it should be able to start an altcoin season, because that's exactly what happened in the previous cycle as well. I also want to look at the ADA weekly chart because I want to show you something very important here. So last year, after we had rate cuts, as you can see in the short term, we went down, but only after a couple of weeks after the rate cuts, that's when we actually had a move to the upside, and I believe the exact same thing is happening right now. So we just had rate cuts, as you can see, we went down quite a lot after the rate cuts, just like we did over there, but we did not actually form a lower low, and we actually stayed above the low that we formed in this area, and that's exactly what we did back there as well. So I believe we're not gonna form another lower low. I believe we're gonna stay above 42 cents, and if we do, the next step would be to get a move like this, because that's exactly what we did over here as well after we had rate cuts. Speaking of the rate cuts, I also want to talk about Bitcoin dominance for a second, because the rate cuts are important for this chart. The last time we had them was back here last year in November, I believe, or at least before November. In the short term, the price or the percentage went up, but after a while it actually started going down, and it started going down in November, I believe on November 18th. And it started going down after it was going up in October, and I believe the exact same thing is gonna happen right now. So first of all, we had the rate cuts right here back in August, just like last year over there, and after the rate cuts, Bitcoin dominance went a bit higher, just like it did right there. We even formed a new high, or at least a local high, in November, and right now I believe we're gonna get this move just because it's pretty much the exact same pattern. I think Bitcoin dominance is gonna start breaking down, because at this point we kind of need Bitcoin dominance to go down, because we kind of need Bitcoin dominance to be at 45 to maybe 41% by January if we want to continue this pattern over here or this pattern over here. So that's exactly what we need to do, and only after Bitcoin dominance starts breaking down, that's when ADA will finally be able to start the much bigger third wave of the third wave. And again, the target for that is at $3.50, and my target for the top of the cycle is still between $5 to $8, but only if we manage to actually start a big move to the upside in November and maybe even get to like $3.50 by the end of November, because otherwise we're not gonna have enough time to actually form a 5-wave move. So that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to check out our YouTube memberships and our Patreon if you want access to all of our charts, and if you want access to our daily Discord updates. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.